Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth, and today across the table, the engineering types. I have Senior Ballistician Jayden Quinlan and Project Engineer Neville. Guys, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yep. So we did episodes number 50 and 52, which was your groups are too small and your groups are still too small. And so for the listener out there, if you have not listened to these, you need to go back and listen to those. Those are timeless, really, as far as that goes. You could listen to those at any time and probably take more information out of them, even if you've listened to it several times before. And with those episodes, we really took a look at some of the dogma that has surrounded the rifle community, the rifle shooting community, and not just precision rifle shooting, but shooting rifle in general, and looked at things from a little more, I'm going to say, scientific metric of measuring things. And we're looking at sample size and how many shots do you have to shoot before you get an accurate depiction of what's going on. And another one of those kind of dogmatic things that's been around is, changing powder charge incrementally, let's say, and shooting 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 shots at a given powder charge or a given overall length, or, one of those metrics. Well, what we're talking about today is using mean radius of your group size to analyze what's happening. Should you make a change to powder or powder charge or whatever? And it really requires the user to kind of recalibrate how they look at things and recalibrate what they think is acceptable. Because for a lot of us, for the history of my entire shooting career up until pretty recently, you shoot a 5-shot group or a 10-shot group or even a 20-shot group. Oh, and that group size was 1 inch. Well, you're looking at 2 shots. You're looking at shot 1 and shot whatever to say, okay, my total group size is a maximum of 1 inch. But what about the other shots that you shot into that group? Do they have a vote as well? And up until, people, this isn't new. This is a thing that, mean radius has been around for a while, but using it to analyze your group size is relatively unheard of. So I want to kick it over to you guys to talk us through, when you shoot a group on paper, what should you be doing and how can you utilize mean radius? What is mean radius?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think the reason why it's kind of foreign at this point in time to a lot of people, and group size has been the lion's share of the metric used over time, is due to the ease of measuring group size versus measuring or calculating mean radius.
Sure.
To do that manually without a electronic device to do it for you, it's very easy to get a group size.
Yeah, tape measure,
calipers,
swag,
whatever, right?
Finger.
Even just your target. A lot of folks will shoot a grid-based target, and you can kind of figure your group size off that pretty easily.
Right.
But mean radius, not so much. That's a lot more difficult because you have to make a measurement of every single shot in the group. And so with like a 3-shot group or a 5-shot group, that's not too difficult. But like you said, if you go back and you listen to those episodes where we discussed the sensitivity or the limitations of those smaller sample sizes, and if you want to live within those limitations, nothing wrong with that at all. But it might not tell you the complete picture that you'll see if you continue to shoot. When you up those sample sizes to kind of what we recommended in those podcasts, the mean radius calc becomes much more difficult.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And but that much more meaningful, though.
Well, I would say even a 3 or 5-shot group, getting mean radius on that with pen and paper is like a little bit arduous. Because you got to find where the center of all those shots are and then correct the point of impact of all those shots to that new center and then find the distance from center of each of all those shots. And so like by hand, like without with a TI-30 or something, it's not horrible, but it's still like for each shot you have to, and then each successive shot adds more and more and more work into all that. So that's I agree. That's probably the main holdup for since forever.
So let's talk about define what mean radius is and what it means to the shooter, and then maybe we can walk through what you should be doing and how you can analyze mean radius. So right off the bat, there's going to be a lot of folks listening to this never heard the words mean or the words radius together, mean radius? Is
Yeah.
there a nice radius? What is mean radius?
So mean radius, the first word is average, right? So it's not middle, it's average. And a lot of times we'll confuse those when we look at a group, even zeroing a rifle or doing something like that, where we're trying to align where we're aiming with where it impacted. It's not the center, it's the average. So mean is average, and then radius is the distance from the center to the edge of a circle, right?
Okay.
Just back to your elementary, kind of math stuff on circle formulas. So the mean radius is the average radius by definition, which is from the mean or average point of impact. So you take all the shot locations and you average them to find where the not the center or the middle, but the average is. The distance from that point out to each shot is the radius of that specific shot. You take all those radiuses and you add them up, or radii, add them up, and you divide by the number, and you get your average or your mean radius.
Okay. Now that's really eloquently laid out. What does that mean for the shooter? Why would we want to know that versus I can, measure a 10-shot group with my two farthest shots from each other and say it's a 1-inch group? What does that mean radius give us as a shooter?
More resolution on, if you want to look at it from a hit probability standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
The outside to outside is like your worst case of that sample size. And then as you continue to shoot, your group is never going to get smaller. Outside to outside, right? It's usually going to grow a little bit or a lot, depending on, 3-shot group versus a 30-shot group. It's probably going to grow quite a bit.
Sure.
But then when you do mean radius, you're getting info from every single one of those shots. So you could shoot a donut that's 1.5 inches, and you could shoot, 3 or 4 or 5 shots in a cluster, and then one on either side that makes it 1.5 inches. Well, those two setups are not going to behave the same for hit probability. Your donut is going to give you a lower hit probability, especially the further out you go.
Yeah,
or
so
smaller.
The group sizes on those two examples would be the same.
Yeah.
But the mean radius would be totally different. And so the mean radius tells you a different story.
Yeah. So you want the smallest mean radius possible.
Yeah. Well, so the way I like to think of mean radius and the way I kind of portray it in some of the classes and stuff that we teach is the simple way to think about it is your mean radius is your average miss distance. Because if you're aiming at a point and you don't hit that point, you hit somewhere by it, right? The shot's a little bit to the right. You missed, right? You did not hit the point that you intended, which would be the definition of a miss. The distance of that miss is the radius, and you're just averaging all of those miss distances to get an average miss distance. Well, how is that useful? Well, if I know what my average miss distance is, like you said, Miles, I can start to paint a picture of probability.
Mm-hmm.
With group size, I can't really do that because I kind of know what to expect as my worst case, but I don't know about anything in the middle.
Yep.
Let's say I have like that example. Let's say it's a 1.5 inch group size, but I'm shooting 1-inch targets at 1-inch paster targets at 100 yards. That 1.5 inch group size doesn't tell me anything about what my chances are to hit that 1-inch pasty at 100. But if my mean radius is 3/4 of an inch, let's say, then I know that half of the time my shots are going to be within 3/4 and half the time they're going to be outside of 3/4. So that kind of gives me a probability. I'm probably going to hit that 1-inch pasty maybe around 50% of the time. Or a little bit higher than that because my mean radius was a little bit smaller than the 1-inch size of the target that I'm looking at. So it gives you more of a capability style metric without getting really advanced and like calculation dense.
Sure.
In some of the other ways.
I would say, right off the bat, even a 3-shot group, you're better to look at mean radius than group size, but it also definitely benefits from increased
more
sample
shots.
size.
Yep.
In your
Just
group.
like number 50 and number 52, you're going to shoot more. So when you guys are analyzing, your precision using mean radius, how many shots are you pumping into a group, say, from your personal rifle, not from like a test fixture where we're, in a tunnel? When you got your guns and you're out there shooting your rifles, how many shots are you shooting?
Most of the time it settles down. Again, this depends on use case, but to like a functionally, stable zone within about 15 shots.
Yeah. So
I'd say 10 to 20.
yeah, 30 would be the statistical, like you want 30, but for the real world application of, we have time and money invested into this, usually you get a really good trend at somewhere between 10 and 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something interesting there that a listener might think of is why, when we did those prior podcasts, we were mostly talking about group size then, because that's the lion's share metric that's used, right? And we talked about how you have to increase your sample size for your group size to become stable or repeatable, right? And that's where we kind of talked about the magic number of around 20 or 30 would be more magical than 20, but let's just say 20. If you shot a 20-shot group size and you repeated 5 more 20-shot group sizes, all of those would be fairly similar to each other. Probably going to vary by, plus or minus 10, 15%, somewhere in that range, call it. That's because you had to get up to that sample size of 20, because with group size, you're only taking into account 2 of them. So you had to run 20 samples to find the 2 most extreme ones in a case where it's stable when you repeat it. When you do a 3-shot group, it's very variable. 3-shot group to 3-shot group to 3-shot group, you get wildly different results. But it's still, you're only taking into account 2 data points. When you go to mean radius, every additional shot you shoot, it's like exponentially more predictable and useful data. So I would say that the mean radius on a 5-shot group is probably as valuable as like a 10 or a 15-shot group size. So it doesn't take it doesn't allow you to shortchange or like
it's not a shortcut
sample size.
You still have to shoot the shots.
But since you're taking into account every shot and not just only 2 of them, it stabilizes more rapidly. You get a better picture sooner with it.
Interesting.
Get into the reloading red zone with reloading tools from Hornady. Innovation, craftsmanship, and reliability. Hornady reloading presses are built with American pride and backed by our legendary no-risk warranty. Hand load precision with tools from Hornady.
So for the shooter out there listening, how can they measure it? We talked about, you mentioned one of the, Texas Instrument, big old scientific calculator. You could probably whip something up in Excel. But how do you guys use mean radius? Or how do you guys measure it?
In the lab, it spits it out for us on the acoustic setups that we have, the acoustic target setups. But in the field, I think the group analysis part of the FordOff app now has it on there, so you can take a picture and then mark each location that it hits, and it'll spit out where you're aiming, where your mean point of impact hit, and then it'll give you a mean radius from mean point of impact.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
that's the easy button.
The longhand calculation would be. You would take your vertical position of your impact, so I'm a 1/2 inch high, 0.5, and your horizontal position of your impact, I'm 1/2 inch right, so 0.5. You would square each of those, so 0.5 squared, and then you would add that to the other one squared. 0.5 squared plus 0.5 squared, and then that number, you square root that, and that becomes your radius. It's Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah, buddy.
So that's where the longhand thing, like Miles opened with, would take you a long time to do. Like if you're doing this on a piece of paper with a pen.
Right. And it's quicker in Excel. Like if you just write the XY coordinate, if you can measure the XY coordinate of each shot and then toss all those into Excel, then all the averages and square roots, you can make formulas in Excel and
copy them and dump them in there.
Yeah.
But the group analysis feature on FordOff is a relatively new feature, and we've got hundreds of thousands of FordOff users out there that may not even be aware of that feature. So if you're listening to this and you're unaware, it's a paid feature, one of the very few in FordOff. It'll cost you $5. It's a one-time purchase, but this feature allows you to take a photo of your group and then carefully select where you are aiming, carefully select a reference range to measure, let's say 1 inch, for example. So you tell the computer this is 1 inch apart, and then you select where your bullets landed, and it'll tell you in relation to where you were aiming, where your point of impact is, and it'll tell you your group size in MOA. It'll tell you your group size just in raw group size, extreme spread, and then it'll tell you the mean radius. And I've had several questions, which is why we're doing the podcast, about what is that? Why do I care? Why is that good? I don't know what to do with that information. Why is it on there?
Right.
And I think from the development side of 4DOF, that was put in there, one, for you guys to use. That, for Jacob,
Right.
who's not on the podcast, but for Jacob, Jayden, Miles, for those guys that are doing the heavy R&D, it was put in there as a convenience feature for us, but also as kind of like laying the groundwork where the industry's probably not ready to completely diverge from group size to mean radius.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to start laying the groundwork and get this out there so that, one, we have it, and two, we can start guiding people on how to use it.
Right? Yeah, because I think there's, and we use it enough that I got a pretty good idea. If you tell me, oh, I shot this mean radius at this distance, I can say, okay, yeah, that's pretty good, or you could, that's not so great.
Mm-hmm.
99% of everybody out there, you tell them, oh, I got a 0.35 mean radius at 200 yards, and they're like, what?
Cool story.
Yeah, what does that mean? And functionally what that means is that's a really, really good shooting group.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think it'll take some time before, and it may or may never, actually may or not ever happen that we get across the industry people using it enough that it becomes familiar to everybody. But it is definitely a better metric. But yeah, it's. So I can see there's always that transition. It's like probably the same thing with using English or metric. Is the U.S. ever going to convert to metric?
Well, and there's probably not a necessity for a wholesale change where everybody is referencing mean radius, because for a lot of people out there dialing in their hunting rifle right now, because hunting season's in 2 weeks, so they're going out and shooting it. They don't really care, and that's okay. But if you're really trying to, one, analyze what your capability is with that rifle system, and two, make assessments on ammo, powder charge, seating depth,
effective engagement range. Right?
Yeah. This is where it really can thrive.
Yeah. And I think with the increase that we all have of available tech capacity, it's so easy now. It's becoming ever increasingly easier to use those tools that would previously just been cornered off into some government lab or something like that, where they've got the ability and the time dedicated to crunch all the numbers and do all that longhand or have whatever, use it. Now it's like, okay, well, I take a picture, poke where my shots are, and then you can generate a lot of the same information and have the cell phone app do it for you, whereas you don't have to be in the nitty gritty and know exactly what all that is. But we can start to start that trend, I think, where people get a better picture of because you start off with what's the system capable, whether that's just the rifle or whether that's the rifle plus you, the shooter, what's that dispersion pattern look like? And then you can apply that downstream to what does that look like at 400? Okay, well then what does that look like at 800, and then, scale your target size and distance accordingly.
Yeah. And group size isn't useless.
No, of course not.
We're not making that statement. And honestly, group size and mean radius, having both of those numbers really start to tell you a story. Because if I have a group size of 1 inch and a mean radius of 1 inch, that tells you shot a perfect donut. All the way around.
Doesn't look real pretty.
If I have a group size of 1 inch and a mean radius of 0.1 inches, that means that likely 9 of those shots are right on top of each other, and there's one flyer that's out an inch, or flyer, right?
Yeah.
That old famous word.
Yeah.
But that's how you can use those two. So you can tell me, verbally over the phone, this is the group size, this is the mean radius, and in my mind, I can start to make some fairly educated assumptions off of what your shot distribution looks like. Not exact by any means, because the majority of the relationship between group size and mean radius is usually around a factor of 3 is what we see pretty often.
4.5.
4.5.
Okay.
Oh wait, group size to mean radius. Yeah,
around 3 to 4.
Yeah, 3 is about right.
So that means that in most of the dispersion patterns or distribution patterns that rifles produce, the group size is generally around 3 to 4 times what the mean radius is.
Okay.
Generally, right? That's what we've kind of back calculated based off a ton of tests.
But not always.
Correct.
And I suppose if you shot a smaller sample size, the chances of having grossly skewed outside of that, kind of 3-factor that you mentioned.
The Hornady Trek Light Lockbox XXL. Constructed of an advanced impact-resistant polycarbonate featuring dual 4-digit TSA locks, the Trek Light Lockbox offers heavy-duty protection at a third of the weight of steel. The included 1,500-pound rated security cable with patented cable connector maximizes cargo space for up to 2 full-sized handguns. The Trek Light Lockbox XXL from Hornady Security.
So that's a good job of explaining what mean radius is, how it's measured, why it's useful. And I kind of want to shift gears and to talk about like practical application, if you will. So there's an industry guy, works kind of on the conservation side that I've been emailing back and forth now for a couple of years. Lance, if you're listening, talking about your 280 Ackley, and he's been listening to the podcast, really enjoying it. And he's getting ready for elk season, 280 Ackley, 162 grain ELDX. And he just wanted some guidance on some load development practices because he's trying to get away from what everybody else has done or what he's been taught, which is, 3-shot group or 5-shot group and powder charges varying by 0.2 or whatever. So we kind of went and said, hey, if it were my rifle, I would pick 2 really good propellants for it, say 4831 and 4350. And I would pick a moderate charge weight, and then I'd pick a little bit hotter charge weight, certainly under max, and separate them by about a grain or grain and a half. And I shoot a 10-shot group of each. And if that should probably tell me which route I should go to investigate more. And, he did that, and he came back with the results, and he's like, was concerned that, wow, I thought this rifle was a lot more accurate than it is, and, what am I doing wrong? And I was like, well, let's take a step back here. One, you shot 5-shot group, let it cool, put another 5 in there, and let's take a see at a 10-shot group. Let's look at mean radius, not just your group size, because you might be falsely led down a trail of, oh, my 3-shot groups are 0.2, 0.3. Now I'm shooting a 1-inch group. What the heck? And it's like, let's look at your mean radius. And it was really a hard shift, but he did understand, like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. That's my, like you said, my average miss distance. Mm-hmm. And that 10-shot group was a lot more telling. One, it gave him a much better representation of what his rifle system is capable of. And 2, it was, one, initially, oh my gosh, this is horrible results. Like, this is unacceptable. And then when he stepped back and looked at it from a little bit different perspective, he's like, okay, wow, that really isn't. That's actually better. And not only do I have a better idea of what it's capable of, I have a better idea of what route I should take from a propellant standpoint. So I say all that because, one, that was a kind of a true story of how this actually worked, and hopefully Lance is out there, getting in the elk. But how do you guys use it for selection? Because that's generally, for me, I'll take 20 shots. I'll go down to the lab. I'll shoot 20 shots at 200, and I'm really looking at that mean radius to tell me, okay, do I just change propellants or do I change bullets? Do you guys use it for that? Do you guys use it for seating depth? If you've seen any of that, do you use it for powder charge? Because if you're just measuring extreme spread and you shoot 4831 and you shoot 4350, and they both have the exact same extreme spread, but you don't look at the mean radius, you're missing out on half the story, because one of the mean radiuses could be 0.2 or 0.3, the other could be 0.7. Mm-hmm. 2 wildly different results. So how do you guys use it in practical application?
I guess it really just depends, but most of the time it's a tiebreaker. If 2 things are close in group size, it's usually the tiebreaker. That's usually the deciding factor. It's like, okay, well, yeah.
So if you're shooting, say, Varget and 4895, and they both shoot an extreme spread of 1.5 inches at 200, now you're looking at,
what's the mean radius look like between that? But there have been times in the past where even the group that shot a worse extreme spread put a better mean radius. So maybe it's like 1.6 and a 1.4, but the mean radius was like tight on this one. I'll take that one.
Really?
Yeah. The thing is, like, you got the bell curve, and each shot you shoot is putting a single point somewhere inside that bell curve. And even at 10 or 20 or 30 shots, like,
you still haven't found the outer boundaries likely.
Yeah, you still haven't, and you don't know, and low probability events happen. So, like, I don't know, this reminded me of it. I was shooting some ammo for Jayden last week, And we're developing, some new loads or whatever for factory ammo, trying different powders and stuff. And we're like, okay, well, here's the reference ammo. This is what we've been loading. Everybody's happy with that. This is the we can expect out of that. And then here's this new powder. Let's try it, and see. And I wish I could record every time I see this happen for all the people that tell me that, like, oh, well, if it shoots a 3-shot group and it's 3/4 minute right off the bat, it's trash. Just throw it away. Like, it's no good. Because exactly that happened. I had 2 different test barrels shooting the same ammo. So we're trying a couple different test barrels with 2 types of ammo. So, but the same ammo shot at the end, like a 1.5-inch 20-shot group at 200 yards out of each one, right? So 3/4 minute factory ammo out of each barrel. But the first 3 to 5 rounds of one of them was a knot hole, and the first 3 to 5 rounds of the other one was the full spread.
Shotgun pattern.
Yeah. And so it's like, in that situation, you're like, again, that's more of a point for shooting more shots than it is for mean radius. But there's a ton of times where, I don't know, you'll get very similar extreme spreads to the point that, like, in the extreme spreads, if you repeat the test and repeat the test, there's more variation on it. Whereas if you repeat mean radius, if you shoot 20 shots, your mean radius is at 200 yards is like within a couple hundredths of an inch, the same.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
whereas
move much.
Group size will be, I don't know, a couple tenths of an inch maybe, either way. And so you can repeat, and you'll have 2 that are neck and neck on, they're pretty close to each other. You'll have them overlap, and one will be bigger, one will be smaller, one will be bigger, one will be smaller. But the mean radius across the board will flatten out way sooner and give you better optics on, like, what is it actually doing.
Awesome. Jayden, how do you use it in practical application for, say, powder selection?
Definitely the way Miles described is kind of a tiebreaker, but also as a initial step into the probability. I really look at that. So especially from like a hunting standpoint, I really want to know what my mean radius is, because I don't want to take a shot on an animal if I'm pushing the boundaries of putting that bullet in the vitals.
Mm-hmm.
And so your very basic, no environmental condition influence or anything like that is that mean radius, because it's your average miss distance. So, at, let's say, and mean radius is pretty much linear. It'll get a little non-linear past a half-second time of flight. Generally, you'll see it start to increase faster than linear. But what I mean by that is, let's say I do my stuff at 100 yards, and I use the Fordoff app in the group analysis, and I get a mean radius of, 0.4 at 100 yards. So if you turn that into an angle, that would be, if we go out to 1,000 yards and it was straight linear, that becomes 4 inches. And so halfway between those two, let's say at 500, that would be 2 inches. So that means my average miss at 500 yards is 2 inches. Well, if the conditions are absolutely perfect, I'm probably willing to make that shot, right? Because the vital size that I'm targeting is substantially larger than my average miss distance. But if the conditions are, there's a little bit of wind and it's, there's a canyon in front of me and it's pretty hilly, like there's a lot of things that make the wind uncertain, I might not take that shot, because I'm already starting with a 2-inch average miss, and any of those environmental influences are just going to make that worse, right? And so I kind of start to use that as a probability metric, and where to draw my lines in the sand when I'm out applying, whether it's hunting or whatever I'm doing. It starts to formulate it on a more educated manner than simply group size, because when I did that 0.4-inch mean radius, maybe my group size was 1.5 inches. Well, 1.5 inches, we blow that out. That's a, say 7 to 8 inch group at 500 yards. That might be bigger than the vital size of the animal, and I don't take the shot at all. So you can start to weigh whether you should make a decision or not.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is more information. Just shoot a few more shots to get more information, make a more educated movement forward on powder selection, bullet selection, shot engagement, all that stuff. So when you guys are looking and analyzing mean radius at, say, 100 or 200 yards, is there a magic number that you're looking for? Or is there, what do you guys, for you individually, deem acceptable or deem exceptional or deem, okay, we need to move on or try a different propellant? Is there a number that we could give our listener, like, hey, if you're new to mean radius, if you see something between here and here, That's pretty good. If you see this, don't change anything. That's really, really good if you're shooting a substantial number of shots.
I'd say good is probably better than like a quarter minute of angle at whatever distance you're shooting. That's pretty solid.
Yeah, so like in the group analysis feature, if you have it set to inches, it'll give you a mean radius in inches.
Mm-hmm.
You could convert that over to like inches per 100 yards to an angle.
Yeah.
So then, run that through different ranges and see what it means. But yeah, mean radius in mils or minute, same thing. But like for a lot of guys that are probably working in inches, at 100 yards, a mean radius of, 0.3 or less is pretty good.
Yeah.
And obviously if you went to 200, that would become a mean radius of like 0.6 or less, So that would be how you'd use that.
And then like really, really good is, at like 200, the good stuff is like under 0.35.
Yeah.
That's like,
yeah.
If you maintain that through 20, 30 shots, that's good stuff.
Most accurate rifle I own, HS Precision Barrel, 6 Creedmoor, 1.2 inches from the shoulder at 200 on 20 shots with a mean radius of 0.3 something. And it's like, yep, that's really good. I'll take that.
Yeah, when you, like at 100 or 2, but at 100, if you start breaking below 0.2 on the mean radius,
Something's
inches,
right.
Not mils, inches. You've really got something going there.
Awesome.
Look at this. 100 free bullets when I buy these select Hornady reloading tools. Wow, 500 free bullets with certain Hornady reloading presses and kits. Well, what do they have? Let's get loaded.
There's no better time to stock your reloading bench. Choose from the most durable, precise, and convenient tools on the market and receive free bullets to get you loaded. Visit Hornady.com for further details.
Next time we get loaded, I'm buying.
So I think that's a pretty good analysis and description for what mean radius is, how to use it, that group analysis feature in ForwardOff, so convenient. And then it gives you the difference, like you mentioned, Miles, where you've got, okay, I'm shooting Varget in 48.95. They shoot the same extreme spread. Well, now you can look at mean radius to be the qualifier. And you're shooting those shots. We recommend you shoot 10, 15, 20, 30 shots into a group. It gives every one of those shots a voice.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just shooting them so you can find your extreme spread. They have a say in what's going on. They have a weight to them in regard to your selection and your group size, and they need to be looked at that way.
Right.
Yeah. Is there anything else in regard to mean radius that you think the listener would find meaningful? Because again, I think for the large majority of our listener, this is the first time they're going to be exposed to mean radius.
Yeah. Another thing I do look at it's not mean radius, but it's related because it's a radius, is the max radius. I do look at that because if I don't remember what episode it was where we went through dispersion, and how it wasn't our fault and that whole thing.
Yeah.
So the dispersioning patterning of a rifle is randomized in its orientation. You don't really get a hand in controlling that. And so whatever, let's say the shot that is the farthest out, the old flyer or whatever, the shot that is furthest out or has the max or the most radius, that shot, the reason let's say it's up at 2 o'clock in the group, kind of high right. That shot could just as easily be at 7 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 4 o'clock. If you repeat the sampling enough, the magnitude of that is what that radius equates to, but the orientation of it was unique to that shot. So the next time you might get another shot with the same magnitude but a different orientation and it goes this way. So sometimes I'll look at max radius as more of a predictive tool of the total group size potential, like if I kept shooting. So meaning if my max radius is 1 inch, like from the mean radius there's one shot that is 1 inch away from that, well, if I shot enough of them, it could end up on the opposing side, which would make that a 2-inch group, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we do look at that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say and I help diagnose stuff like accuracy issues that are on bullet presses, trying to get them shooting in the lab before they turn the press on for a production run. And a lot of guys will freak out, because they'll see, well, I got a cluster of, 6 shots, and then there's a couple others, but then you'll have like one big flyer out high left and then one down low right or one down low, and the total group size is, let's just say like 1.5 inches, and they're like, wow, I got to get them under 1 inch, like that's huge. And then like the next group they shoot maybe will be 1.1. It still doesn't make it, but they've got their same cluster, but then they've got 2 of them that are both high left. Well, that's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, whether those 2 went high left and now I have a 1.1 inch group, or the one came back around here and now I have a 1.5 inch group. If you look at the mean radius, it's almost identical. Yeah. And those behave the same. It's just you're at the random, at the will of the gods of random distribution.
Yeah. It's a randomized paper hole punch at that point.
Right.
And you don't get to choose where any of those go.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of a visual, I guess, if you want to think of it. Like group size is an opaque black circle that covers, everything, and you see nothing inside of it. And then mean radius is more of kind of like a shaded, like sunglass lens that has a darker center that fades to the outside. Mm. And that's more accurate to how shot distribution is. If you look at the distribution of where the shots actually go, there's more of them closer to the center, and then as they go out, it's kind of that bell curve shape where the distribution of those shots gets less and less and less, but they still will go out to those extreme ends. And so, looking at, all the shots land inside here, okay, that tells you one picture, but then seeing that how the distribution of it, allows you to make a little bit better judgment call on what's going on.
Awesome. Well, for the listener out there, if you have questions on mean radius, do some research. You can drop comments right here on YouTube. You can email us, podcast@hornady.com. We'll try to help you out as best we can. But if you're using an app that has this feature, the Hornady 4DOF app, like I mentioned, with the group analysis feature, or if you've got an Excel formula or you're doing it longhand, this can really be a useful tool for you guys to help analyze your actual capability with you and your rifle system. So with that, I want to shift gears one last time, completely unrelated to mean radius, but maybe we can make it related. It's October, late October. Jayden, you've got an elk hunt coming up like this week.
Yes, sir.
I just want the listener to know, what's Senior Ballistician Jayden Quinlan taking on the elk hunt for rifle, cartridge, bullet?
Good question. So with a lot of effort, I took my 300 PRC barrel off of I have a switch barrel, like on a bighorn action.
Yep.
Took my 300 PRC barrel off, which has killed the elk of the past, and screwed the 7 PRC barrel on. And the reason I did this, so I want to be limited by my skill set and not by my equipment. So my equipment should be capable of doing more than I can do. The 300 PRC has always done everything I've wanted it to do, and I kind of draw my line in the sand under very perfect conditions with adequate practice and statistically valid testing that supports it. High hit probabilities at 800. That's kind of where I draw my line in the sand. So with the 7, it'll do that job out to 8, but I hadn't messed with that setup quite a bit. So what I was interested in with the 7 versus the 300 was the reduction in recoil. Mm-hmm. And a slightly shorter system. So the 7 PRC is a 22 inch versus my 300 that's a 26 inch because I shoot suppressed. So that just lumps another chunk on the end, So the testing was really, and you were out there for a lot of it when we were at the range that day, was shooting off of a tripod standing, shooting off a tripod kneeling, shooting off of like a long Harris that you can sit with, extended, and then prone, and seeing at what ranges can I still observe the impacts on target and essentially get back on it. And the 7 from a hit probability standpoint was pretty much equal to my 300, but that reduction in recoil is where the money gets made.
Yeah,
on me
buddy.
Hunting with that this year. So hunting with 7 PRC with 175 ELDX factory.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the decision there? Because I know last year you were playing with the 160 CX, which is a great bullet.
Mm-hmm.
What pushed you to the 175 for this particular hunt?
I've always been partial to the ELDX. I got to be a part of the team that designed those, and so I don't know, in the back of my head, that little bit heavier lead core.
Yep.
Just I've hung my hat on the performance of the ELDX so many times, and I've never been disappointed. I thought,
Excellent.
I'm gonna stay consistent.
So 22 inch proof carbon fiber, Thunder Beast Ultra 5.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, good luck on the hunt. I know that was unrelated. I just wanted to hear. I wanted to hear you say it out loud to all of our listeners. He's conceded. He's conceded to the victory. It's a great card. You can't go wrong with either one of them. And I think the shorter platform makes a lot of sense, especially where you hunt and how you hunt. Like, it's lighter, it's shorter, more ergonomic, and inside of your performance criteria, it checks every box.
Yeah,
excellent. Maz, got any hunts coming up?
Nope. I put in for the same draw as him, and I didn't draw.
Okay. Maybe
cooler
next year.
than Miles.
Yeah,
according to the state of Colorado.
Yeah, you spent more money to the state of Colorado. That's what that says.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
No, and I think we got the PRS finale coming up, so we're gonna see if we can win gas gun PRS.
All right, what do you run for PRS gas gun?
6mm arc, and I'm running Varga and 109 ELDMs.
Excellent, in a 24-inch truck axle AR barrel.
Yep.
Awesome.
We'll see how it plays out.
That is coming right up. I know you were at the range this weekend. I'm sure you've been shooting the 7 PRC. So good luck this fall. Completely divergent goals, but man, you know what? It'd be great to see success for both of you guys.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So if you are successful, maybe we'll have to do a summary podcast for anybody that makes it to this portion of this one.
Yeah, I would be glad to give the whole world all the information I know about semi-automatic precision rifle series.
Yeah. Not a fan, we could say that.
I won't do it again, but it's been a learning experience.
All right. Well, I wish you guys the best of luck, like I mentioned, and thanks for coming on the show.
You bet.
Yep, absolutely.
Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode about mean radius and what it is and how it can benefit you as the shooter and as the hand loader. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one.